Cool. All right. Well, welcome to Tools for Thought Rocks, a group of folks that are working with tools for thought, creating tools for thought, using tools for thought, basically using our computers to help us think better. I'll give a real quick overview of kind of what we do here, and then we'll give most of the time over to Sophia and Tudor to kind of walk us through what they're doing. One of the tools for thought, like our focus here is like I was just saying about using computers to help us think better, but there's a specific focus too in terms of interchange of like, how do we actually get all these tools to work with one another, but also how do we interchange ideas? A lot of it, I saw just had an email in my inbox 30 seconds ago from yet another tool for thought that I won't mention of like, check out our new text editor, our document editor. And like the thought that went through my brain is the number of tools for thought companies that are currently working on document editors right now is astonishing. The number of engineering hours that are going into moving text around on a screen. But that's kind of what's happening right now with this sort of explosion of tools for thought. And this is kind of a place where people can come together that are using a lot of different tools and exchange ideas, as well as hopefully figure out how to make these dang things work together. All right, some quick links for folks who don't know. If you are here, you probably got here through Luma. So I probably don't need to tell you that we have a community site on Luma. It's at toolsforthought.rocks. You can also, by the way, if you're a member of that community and you have related events, you can add those to the Luma community as well. So if you have things that you think this community of people would be interested in, feel free to add those to the community calendar. And we try to also post messages to that sort of community bulletin board with links to the previous month's recordings, any notes that might have been taken, and that kind of stuff. So kind of watch that space for announcements for upcoming events, as well as like recordings and that kind of stuff from this event and others. We also have a couple other resources that you could leverage. One is the Fission Codes team has been so generous to offer us to host us on their Discord, so that we don't have yet another Discord to join that is for one distinct purpose. So there's a Tools for Thought channel in the Fission Discord, which you can get to at fission.codes/Discord. The Fission Codes teams has also donated this Zoom link and is paying for this little pro Zoom account. So we appreciate you guys' support. You can also go onto YouTube. We have past recordings on there, and there's some really great stuff on there if you want to go through and see some of the past recordings. We have a GitHub account, and we've been using that sparingly to sort of archive the chats and some of the notes that people take during these meetings. And then finally, the main thing that we do is get together once a month and have a speaker series. We try to rotate between time zones to kind of allow people across the globe to participate, but really it's more bound by the time zones of our presenters than it is by the time zone of our attendees right now. So we'll have to get some presenters that can present in the Australia/China/East Asian time zone for maybe for December. And if you would like to give a talk at Tools for Thought Rocks, we would love to have you. You don't have to be building a tool for thought. Tudor and Sophia are, but you don't have to do that in order to speak. This is just as much about people that are using them, trying to use their computer to help them think better. And really the talks are more of a provocation for the conversation. And if this is your first time here, you'll see that this group is actually pretty talkative, chatty, asks a lot of questions, and the conversations really present just or the talks present sort of a backdrop for those conversations. The other thing that we do that I don't have on the slide right now is we do what's called workflow walkthroughs, which is kind of like a lightning talk, maybe a 5-minute talk that's really focused on some specific way that you use your computer to help you think. And we really want to see your actual, beyond the features of the tool, you actually want to see what you do with it. So if we've had a couple people show LogSeq and how they use LogSeq to be like a personal CRM. We've had people show how they organize their Notion. So we've all seen Notion, we all know what the features is, but what was interesting was how that person organized their Notion docs in order to kind of be their second brain. So if you'd like to give a workflow walkthrough, let us know and we can put you on the calendar for next week or next month. So Boris, did I miss anything before we jump into letting the speakers speak?
I think all good, other than I don't think that we'll have an event in late December, or maybe we'll do something interesting like maybe in 2 weeks or so, do just kind of a chill hangout or something like that. So we'll talk about that afterwards and let everyone know. Hashtag Tools for Thought rocks if you want to coordinate finding interesting links on Twitter.
Yep. And the final thing I'll say about the talks is that they're meant to be interactive, and this group doesn't usually need any encouragement for that. But I'll also be watching the chat, trying to respond there. And at the end, Sophia will have 20-ish minutes to talk, and then we'll have 20-ish minutes of Q&A. And similar for Tudor. And if y'all, Sophia and Tudor, I'm leaving it completely up to y'all how you want to use the time. If you're like, I want to speak uninterrupted for 15 minutes and then take questions, or if you want to like pause during, you can kind of give us that cue. And if you don't give us that cue, we might interrupt you. We'll try to be polite, but this group usually has questions. So, all right, without further ado, Sophia, I'm going to have you present first. I hope I should have let you know that earlier, but it was implicit in the invite, right? So Sophia is going to be talking about Unigraph, which is a new open source tool for thought that that is sort of multimodal and has a lot of different mediums incorporated in it. It has some inspiration from a lot of the current things that are in process. It's open source, it's local first, so a lot of buzzwords out there about what it's been doing, but it's also brand new. And so a lot of us haven't had a chance to tinker and play with it. So excited for Sophia to kind of talk about what she's building and why she's building it. So turn it over to you.
All right. I hope everyone can see my screen right now.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right, cool. So I'll just get started. I really love that this is a very interactive event. So I have my chat open on my second screen. If anyone have any questions, just pop in the chat and I'll try to stop and answer them. And without further ado, I'll begin my presentation. Okay, cool. So hello everyone, my name is Sophia, and this is Unigraph, a personal project I've been doing for a year and just launched my landing page. It got quite a good reception. We have like 1,000 waiting list signups in a week, and our Discord community now is at approaching 400 members. So I am very happy for you guys, not like you guys specifically, but like everyone showing the support. And maybe I'll try to explain a little bit why I think Unigraph can be a good idea to basically complement, not replace your tools for thoughts, and more generally like in the productivity space. All right, so as we know, productivity apps are really booming, and probably because of like COVID, like a lot of investments have been going on, and there are just generally a lot of attention on productivity apps. But the question I want to ask is that how much does that translate to our actual productivity? Like how do we, for example, like how do we even measure something like that? And also, what are the problems with current productivity apps as the medium? So the main question I want to focus today is that everyone's productivity data is siloed into many different apps, and there are no obvious ways to connect. For example, if I have like a Google Docs and like a Google kind of like calendar type of thing, I want to connect it to my Notion workspace. There's not like an obvious way for it to connect, for example, sync my calendar to Notion. And there are kind of like two solutions to it. The first one is just like the unified all-in-one approach, which basically puts everything into like this one workspace that is completely controlled and have like a unified user experience. But there's like this immediate problem. Like I'm not sure like if you guys are familiar with the XKCD comic, but essentially, yeah, there's like not an obvious way for why people should adopt your standard except for like everything else. So it will most likely increase this kind of like fragmentation instead of like decreasing it. For example, like a common question is, how would I connect my Notion workspace to Roam? There's not like an obvious way to do it. Unigraph takes a completely different approach. So we integrate with all of the external sources. We connect and try to sync with them so that any changes can be reflected. For example, if you edit an event on Google Calendar and you have that connected to Unigraph, Unigraph will sync that update and dynamically update any references to that calendar event. And it's universal and searchable. It should have like one unified experience for you and your brain, so that your brain knows what to expect, and it can use the search bar everywhere to basically search for information that you need that is on your mind and you're doing it right now, and intuitive and connected. In Unigraph, everything is an object, and you can drag anything and drop it anywhere. So for example, you can drag a Kanban board into a node list, and that'll be automatically embedded in that node list. It works very intuitively because that's how like your brain thinks in connected items, instead of just like silo different types with different kind of like files and file system. File system is like really bad metaphor. And we completely ditched the file system metaphor instead of like having a completely graph-based dynamic environment that your brain can naturally accustom to. And it should be extensible and hackable. Our type system allows for like declarative definitions for like extensions and schemas that you can define on your own. And if you're like less experienced, you'll be able to access an app store essentially and download things other people created that works for your workflow. We built on a solid foundation. The database is the graph, a very fast and very bare bones native graph.
Sophia, one little thing, you're going 1,000,000 miles an hour, and we're literally basically going like, oh my God, it does everything. So I'm just going to pause you a little bit and say, I have a question from the previous thing. So you ditched the file system, you're using a graph, and literally even that first point, are things like calendars or calendar events a first class type? So I can have different types of calendars coming into one calendar type?
Yeah, you can have like all different types of calendar. Like if you have like an Apple calendar, the Google calendar, all of these things are specified in like their own metadata. For example, Google Calendar would need like a sync token, sync with the Google API. It's completely invisible from the user, and like everything is treated equally if you have like registered it as a calendar type. And all of like views that works on calendar type will work on any of the like calendars from different sources.
Right. So this reminds me of DabbleDB, which is something I actually end up saying on a lot of calls because I keep wanting that to come back. Are some of those, is that accessible? Are those types sort of reusable at the attribute level? So is the way that I link to or backlink a calendar event, does it use the name as the title, just like the note or a block or a page of a title?
Yes, it actually beats on this custom type system that is built exactly for this purpose.
Okay.
So you can have everything is composable and referenceable. We basically separate the referenceable object from like its primitive correspondence. So you can reference the same primitive as a reference everywhere, and it basically kind of like lives on the heap. And if you change the primitive, like all of the responses will be changed as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Does anyone else have questions? Since I figure some others might have been a little overwhelmed in that flood of awesomeness, the flood of awesomeness, Sophia. Let me be clear.
I'm going to have a demo. Like I'm trying to rush through this presentation because
okay, keep going. Keep going.
Okay, so after that I have a demo, and it's going to be more interactive. So we talked about the database. It's written in Go. It's very fast. Unlike some of the like other approaches, like DataScript is written like totally in browser, and it's not really fast. And type system, we basically talk about that also. It's an in-house algebraic type system that's basically like kind of like somewhat enforces type safety. So you cannot have like a Boolean field with like an for example, like a string, like because the renderer will not doesn't know like what to do with it. But also it's extensible. So it does not have like a fixed schema. You can add any attributes, custom attributes, or anything to your preference independently of the designed schema, like all on your own. And the front end is also very solid. It's in React, TypeScript, Electron. It's very easy to hate on these technologies, but it can compose custom components on the fly, custom JavaScript components, and using React, JSX, and maintaining the compatibility to render it into raw HTML for integration for other apps. For example, in my basically in my idea for an Obsidian integration, you're going to have, for example, you can search for Unigraph objects directly in Obsidian. And after that, it will be embedded as like raw HTML in the iframe, so that you can see how the object is viewed in like Unigraph directly from Obsidian. So it's like a much more deeper level of integration instead of like surface level. All right, now it's time for demo. After that, I still have 2 slides about my basically upcoming investments, ideas, and what we're going to do in the future as a roadmap. So I hope everyone can see my window, like the demo window. Maximize. Okay, so as you see, this is the homepage, and it has the different cards, and all of the cards are conditional cards, and which means it will only show when, for example, there are actually contents to show. And this allows you, for example, when you start of the day, you can see what's going on and what's happening in the day, and there are like all the upcoming events, and I like articles that you haven't read before. For example, you've like made like 10% the progress reading that, you can continue to read, jump back in, and you can see like you can read something new from an inbox or like read later feed. So this is like everything in one place. And in the top of here, you can see like all the apps and homepage. Yeah, it's like a custom dashboard or things. This is like one version of it. Another version is like a custom dashboard like this, which basically allows you to combine arbitrary views. So this is basically just like a document. It's like this document, and it can embed it in like this dashboard just by drag and drop. For example, you can drag your read later feed to the dashboard, and here you go, voila. This is like all of the read later feed, and you can unlock the paintboard layout, and that is broken. But like basically, you can rearrange them anywhere you want. Yeah, and the phone, if you subscribe to the upcoming Cloud Sync solution, which is basically $15 a month, or if you want to like self-host it on your own server, this is acceptable also as a standalone web app. So you don't have like all of like system integrations with Electron, but like you also get to view it anywhere. So it's just like a front end, web front end, you can work anywhere. And let's refresh that. Yes, this is the dashboard, and I'll like basically showcase some of the features. I have like 5 minutes to show everything before I go back to my slides, and then we can have like interactive conversations. This is the inbox. As you can see, it syncs like all of your items. This is like your Twitter feed, your RSS feeds, your email, and your Reddit feed, and everything is sorted in this chronological order. And this is like the only inbox you ever check that I'm going to say like that. And you can, for example, just like do your normal like reading things flow, but comparing to like recommender systems, this have a limit. So, you know, like when you drag it down, it does not sync your forever time into it. You only get like to see like what's important in this, but also in the future, we'll be having like a recommender system as well, like based on NLP and machine learning, so that you can cluster these things by interest areas. Currently, you can group them by type. It takes a while, yeah. So this is like all of the Reddit, like Reddit subscriptions. Here are the tweets, and here are all the RSS feeds, and here are the emails. You can filter by any of the types, and in the future, you'll be able to group it by interest or like interest area, so that you know if I want to read some cryptocurrency or startup, I can do that first and do everything later. And it just like basically just jump back into like the read later view. So this is basically a full like a reader view for every article, no matter if you add it as a web bookmark or if you add it as like basically RSS feed. You can basically adjust the font size and adjust like the things like that. And also this is where I show like the read later view. So not like read later, but like incremental reading. So for example, if I finish like 50% of a very long article, you can just click here. It will save to my read later feed as a percentage. So as you can see, I have like 9% into this article. I'm gonna click it, basically like resumes from where I left off. And this is really cool. And also like another thing is a custom component. So for example, this speed reader view is a custom component. When you click it, it's just gonna basically flash the words in front of you in 400 words per minute. And it basically this is a custom component created and user editable. So if you go to the code editor here, you can see the speed reader view. And this is like the demo text that I added for another person. I'm gonna delete this and say save and refresh. And I go to an article here. And I go with open the speed reader view. And it's still cached for some reason, but like if you give it enough time, it's basically be gone, and you'll be able to customize everything on the fly as like a custom editable. And when you finish it, you can also package it as like basically an app that you can send to other people for them to download and use, which is really cool. And this is that. And also I want to show like the universal pluggability / extensibility. So this is my essentially like a master doc for my Unigraph works. So I can drag it here. And essentially what I have here is a like basically a Rome-like outliner that's very responsive. You can do double bracket links, or you can do this kind of like block embeds. But like comparing to Rome, you can embed anything. For example, just like embed a tweet. I click on it, it will be embedded right here as a block reference. Instead, like this is just a tweet, and the tweet can link to, for example, this bookmark that is basically linked in the tweet. I can click on it. This is the bookmark, like the link in the tweet, because everything is composable, so you can do anything on it. And also, this is, for example, like a Kenman board embedded in like in this master documents, but also you can have a more traditional kind of like Rome like Kenman board embed just by doing this. And this is like basically what you do in Rome. This is a Kanban board, but instead this is just a like embed to a node. It does not live in, like all the blocks does not live in this block. Everything is standalone. And if you go on here, this is the Kanban board, and you can basically drag and drop anything here. And it's not only to, for example, like to-do list or something, and it can also add arbitrary things. For example, if I would just want to add a random bookmark from the chat, I can copy that. I can click on add card. It does not work for some reason. And for example, if you want to add a bookmark, you just press add BM, and you're going to be adding like a bookmark to this Kanban board and press enter. It's going to crawl it, and it does not work in this case, but like, and for example, like it's basically going to crawl the website, and it'll be able to add it as an article directly in this list of to-do lists. And you can drag and drop between like different lists, for example. And like you can also add arbitrary things. This is a note block, which is basically like a page in Rome. We don't discern between blocks and pages in Unigraph. Everything is a block, and the page is just a block with an extra attribute. Yeah, hopefully this is very kind of like intuitive for people. And also I want to show off this kind of like integration with other things. For example, this is thanks my Google Calendar. It's everything that is happening in the next 7 days. I can, for example, just like embed any of them into like an article. For example, in like the landing page I've showed is like how I can plan for a, where is it? I do not remember. Oh yeah, here. So here's like the example document, and that shows like the integration ability. So this is an email that syncs from my Gmail account, and this is basically my invoice for an event. And here are like all the event so like calendar events happening that are synced to Unigraph in Gmail, and I can reference them like right in with the block references. Yeah, so it's really cool. And the last feature I want to show is the search bar. It's basically search for everything. You can, for example, type schema / tweets, so to only search for tweets. And for example, I want to search for just anything. You'll be able to see like all of the Twitter feeds, like Twitter items matching like the text with this tweets. When we delete that, it'll be able to search for everything, like from Reddit to email, to RSS feeds, to everything, like to your notes, etc. I don't have a notes on this topic. And yeah, this is everything. And I have to go back to my, I think my presentation, because that's about like basically investments. So I'm trying to plan to raise pre-seed / angel investments. I'm looking to $500K, and that will be entirely spent on hiring and building a team. And the team will basically work on integrations and basically integrates for everything you can imagine to. And that is that's probably going to be a very high cost, but I feel like it's going to be worth it, because you'll be able to plug into your favorite workflow, including Rome and Obsidian, Notability, and everything. And you'll be able to just like edit them here in Unigraph, and changes will be reflected over there, like in Rome or Obsidian or Logseq or whatever. Or you can edit them there and they'll be changed, like sync will be synced here. So everything is very user-friendly. We do not try to lock you in like our ecosystem. And plus you can basically run arbitrary queries and basically using a variant of GraphQL. So you can see here, this is like how, for example, you want to run a query, and it's basically GraphQL, and you run it. You'll be able to get a JSON file. This is served by the dgraph, and this is served by dgraph currently, and you'll be able to do like complex GraphQL queries with recurse. And if you're going to run it, you'll be able to see all of the data, and you can basically develop anything on top of it without even dipping your toe into Unigraph. So this is really cool. So we want to maintaining our dgraph fork and enhance full text search. Dgraph's full text search is not very good. It does not have TF-IDF. I'm trying to do that with a team, preferably with some Go engineers that can help me with the progress and new features. So basically, the killer feature will be like Cloud Sync. It syncs your data, like feeds, email, read leisure, calendar, etc. for you when you're offline, because everything here is just like locally hosted. It's an Electron app. So when you're offline on the go, it won't be synced. But if you subscribe to the Cloud Sync version, you'll be able to sync it. Or you can, for example, just like self-host it on your own server. But like you have to pay for the server anyway. So another thing will be annotation. You can annotate websites, books, or PDF in one place. And all the annotations will be, for example, just like a note block. And you can basically integrate that into your Rome or your Obsidian or your essentially Logseq processes as well. And also you have like another killer feature is like people view or like a personal CRM. Like this is much more polished and it's much more integrated. Basically, you can see all the meeting logs. You can see like all the calendar invites, messages, email histories, tasks delegated to them, social media profiles and notes and other things. And in the future, we also want to introduce that to Teams / Enterprise with a flexible licensing plan with the optional, because the code base is in MIT, so everything still works with MIT license. But like you'll be able to get more support and more packages in like enterprise plans. Yeah, so I'm actively looking for investments. I do have a couple of leads. I'm actively talking to a couple of angels right now, and like the plan is to raise 500K to essentially build a company and hire a team. And all of the source code basically going to be open core, and everything will be MIT. And everything you see here will be MIT. There's no going back for licensing. And all of the community contributions will be MIT as well. Here are some relative links. I'll paste it into the message chat. And here we have about 90 minutes for Q&A sessions. All right, so everyone go ahead.
Wow.
Jazz hands. Thanks for that rush.
I'm going to just try to cover so many things. I don't know.
So, Sophia, I have to ask, it's a slightly facetious question, but what are you not trying to do?
I think it's like that is also like a question as important as like what you're trying to do. Because what I'm not trying to do is to replace a user's entire workflow. We want Unigraph tries to like give the user the flexibility between choosing their own apps of choice and Unigraph references without having to adopt them like Unigraph all at once. It's more of like a fractional process. For example, I can show you my Google Calendar right now. Everything I have like here is on my Google Calendar. So Unigraph basically just like syncs to my Google Calendar because I do not want to edit this right in Unigraph. And like I can do everything here. I have like Calendly plugged into my Google Calendar. So everything will be synced to my Google Calendar first, and Unigraph will sync it with the Google Calendar next. So it's more like a Google Calendar first. Same thing with Gmail. I do everything on my email account, but like not in Unigraph. I don't use Unigraph as an email client, more like an inbox to see what I've missed and basically searching through emails and embedding them to relevant notes. Yeah. So this is like the philosophy behind why I want to use Unigraph.
So
Just to make
Unigraph
it
is like
easier
this
for
like
everyone.
universal viewer, basically. And then when you want to do a specific thing that isn't done in Unigraph, you'd go out to that application and do that thing. But it's also, everything you do in there is also sucked into Unigraph.
Exactly.
That's cool. That's neat. Mark, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
I'm a bit curious. You said that there's an algebraic type system there. And is it compile time, backend compile time, front-end compile time, or is it totally dynamic?
It's totally dynamic. It's like it lives in the user space. So we do like type checking and everything in our like basically a common library in JavaScript. Everything is implemented in TypeScript. And
Okay.
it's basically trying to do that recursion to see what are like if this is possible. The type system is very permissive. So you can basically omit any field. It only throws an error when there's the type incompatibility, basically.
Okay, so you're building your own runtime type system.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, thank you. Congrats. Excellent.
As one does. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Awesome. Great to see it live. Two questions, one high level, one down in the weeds. The detailed question is, can you talk a little about the distinction between objects and views? When I've been playing with it and as I watch you play with it, I see that views are things, but I'm not clear what they do in this world. So that's one question. The second question is, you talked about the enterprise and team and all of that. Is the system, does it have a notion of multiple users, or is it still a single user system?
And currently it supports single user systems. I'll just answer the second question because that's more straightforward. And in the future, we'll be able to add ACL, like access control on top of it, and basically have like a multi-user environment. But like that will require a little bit heftier investment because it's hard to do access control on the graph.
Yeah.
Like basically, like that's like the kind of question on part of the difficulty of how to do syncing like on top of a graph. How would you sync that like a part of subgraph to other people? And that is a question, like a distributed system question. And I'm very eager to solve them, but I cannot do it alone. I need a team to do that.
And is that your strategy, to have a bunch of users in a single graph, or will you have separate graphs, one per user, and then sync them?
All the users will be in a single graph, because the graph actually supports replication. It's using Raft as the consensus system, but I'm also planning to like basically explore other systems that like not very consistent, but are more highly available as you would want in like a system like this. And more about like consistency, like fractional consistency, you can have a part of the system that is consistent and a part of the system that is highly available. It depends. And about the question of like views, essentially views are just an object. So you can see this object is a view, and it's basically as like schema/view object, and views are also objects. You can see, for example, in the reach object viewer, and you can click here, and the view is going to be the object view of this, like basically this Kenman board.
So this is exactly how TiddlyWiki works. You just tag something as a view, and it's a view.
Yeah, exactly. But like we don't use tags instead of like types, because like types allows us to check for like basically type incompatibilities, have much more safety of it. And currently like the view for like to register a custom view, I'll just like show you guys the source code +++, and like everything is very pluggable. And you can see like the definition of what is a view. So this is the definition of an object view. And it's in the Unigraph.core package. You can replace this with whatever you want, because that's the beauty of it. You can edit the like app right inside the app. So the view like you have like a name, which is basically like the name of the view, and you have like an item type, which is basically what type of object it applies on, and the view inside is just like an executable object, and you can see the executable here. For example, this is the Kenman view, how the Kenman view is ordered, and this is directly just like a React component, and when you click on it, it basically just compiles this on the fly and just gives you this view.
Got it. Great. Yeah, thanks. That helps.
Michael, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I just really want to, it's really neat to see the universal search feature. I've been looking for something like that for a while. Like I've been looking into Power Toys for Windows, Command E, I think I tried for a bit there. It didn't really work. I'd even looking at like Promnesia on GitHub there to satisfy that need. So I'll be interested to see how that works. That's really cool. But one question I had is what do you think, how would you describe your target user for an app like this?
I have like a user referring to this as a Bloomberg terminal for tools of thought or like for productivity and really like that. And for the current iteration, it'll be more geared to power users like professors and basically investors or kind of people that really want to have like dive in like very deep into the subject, and researchers, and try to connect knowledge in their heads to produce actual productivity. But like in the future, we want to explore the possibility of having people build custom views and custom components and package them in a very nice, like neat little way, in order for people to like essentially try to install like all the plugins, just like you want to install apps and like an app store. But like Salesforce App Exchange or something like that, and you'll be able to just like use it even as a normal user or like a student without any barriers. And I think another question you said is, what is it? Like a universal search? Yeah. So for example, like what I showed here, I use Command E for the global shortcut, and you can basically add an item or search for Unigraph. Basically, if you want to have like search, you just like need to add the question mark as a predicate as the search query, and you can search for everything anywhere. Like here, for example, and you can also add a new object. For example, add and TP and ABCDEF hashtag example. You can see like this is like the live preview thing, and tomorrow it's due tomorrow, and you have like 5 importance priority. It's basically live updated, so you know like a real-time feedback type of thing. You can do it. And for example, you can also add a note. And like add N, ABC, and you enter it, it basically goes to that note. So you can start writing right now. Yeah, so that's it. I hope that answers your question.
It did, thank you.
Sophia, I was curious, like, I assume that you use, it looks like you use Unigraph yourself.
Yeah, I've been using it for a month.
Yeah. How would you say, you know, your sort of patterns of work, or like, what are some specific ways that you use your computer that are different now that you're using Unigraph regularly than when you were using, when you weren't using it? So.
Mostly because I currently have a 16-inch MacBook Pro, so my workflow is basically just like pre-registered as like Unigraph. So here, it's basically just like basically give me a overview of what I have like on my plate available to do, and upcoming events, what's happening right now, and also like to-do lists. And if I really want, I can just like go back to the normal view and just like by doing it here and go to the Kenman to see what I have right now. The database is really slow because like that's a bug I have to fix right now. I have not fixed right now. And another very major use case is that I use it on mobile. But like the basic idea is that I'll go like open my inbox every morning when I wake up and go through like important things that are happening, and including like all of the RSS feeds and Twitter and stuff, so that I do not like I don't use social media that often. Now I have Unigraph, and it's much better for my mental health than any before. Because in Unigraph, you can also like choose to subscribe to those people that you want to subscribe to as news sources, instead of just like subscribing because you're like mutuals and friends. So you don't have like this kind of like constant emotional like things flashing in front of you. You're able to see like what's happening in the world, what things I'll be interested in, and move on with my life. And if you're like if I'm interested in like an article, for example, I can drag and drop anything to just like to the read later view. And for example, like you can also like drag an article from like a link from a Twitter and like from a tweet, because everything is in a graph. I can drag it. Now I have like in read later, and I can just like remove all the previous items. So this is like basically my daily workflow. I hope that helps. Yeah.
Yeah, that was super helpful. Cool. Rob, I think you had a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, if you're bringing all of this information from various applications together and making it like all searchable and such, how are you dealing with or intending to deal with problems that come around from just sheer quantity?
Currently, like dgraph is very scalable. It's very horizontally scalable. So essentially, like the depth does not go very further than, like, for example, like normally 7 or 10 layers. And for everything like deeper than that, it's gonna take a little while to load, but it's acceptable. It's well below 500 milliseconds. And a person, like a reasonable person, should say, I do not see any interruptions here. And it's really good with horizontal scalability. So it's mostly just like an issue of how much storage spaces you have. So currently I have this much objects, and basically it runs as fast as a brand new installation. So this is like how it's more like due to dgraph and how dgraph stores data. It's not like specifically something Unigraph have to worry about. And because we built on like this solid foundation that is a demonized graph database instead of something running in the browser. And
Okay,
also like it supports sharding and everything if you have like truly like billions of nodes and trillions of edges or things like that.
Well, it's very interesting that it like handles it speed wise. I was more referring like from the user perspective of, you know, there's just so much information in there. Will I actually be pulling up the thing that I want to reference? Will I, you know what I'm getting at?
Yeah, signal to noise ratio. And that's a problem I hope to solve with NLP. So for example, if I want to reference something, I can give a context. Like, for example, when I do like a block reference, it'll be able to basically see what's the context are like in the previous, in the next block, and like basically in the entire document, and try to rank like the articles not based on TF-IDF, but like not only based on TF-IDF, but also based on like smart, basically ranking in like powered by language models. And that's probably going to be paid as well, just like as a way to revenue.
Thank you.
To Steve and Orion, I see your hands. There's 2 questions in the chat. How are you planning to keep things from outside in sync? For example, I delete a tweet after I've pulled it into Unigraph, asked Kushen.
It does not have that just yet. Like if you delete the tweet after it's pulled in Unigraph, it's going to be there forever. And as far as I know, there is not a very reliable way for us to check that in terms of like the Twitter API. But like for supported applications like Gmail or Google Calendar, if you delete something, if I delete an event, for example, it will just like go to deleted view. So it would like go right back to the trash bin. For example, this is like a calendar event I deleted in Google Calendar, and it basically goes to my trash bin. And it's based on like this Google Calendar API. So only when the API provides it, you can do it. Otherwise, you cannot do it.
I would say there's probably, having built some of these systems before, there's some advantages in how you might want to set that up. You might very well want to have a local archive of stuff if they get deleted, quote unquote, upstream. Probably very use case specific as well.
Yeah.
Chad asked, will we be able to open multiple windows or tabs simultaneously?
You mean like in the app? It doesn't, like it currently just like does support like multi windows and tabs. And also it supports like this pop-up view, when you can just like basically pop up a view. If you have like multiple monitors, you can drag like, for example, the inbox. It's still very buggy, but like you get what I'm like, you know what I'm saying? Like if you have like an inbox, for example, you like drag this to a second display and have it like work over there. This is not my creation. It's by a library called Kaplan / like it's basically like a React library that basically handles this for you. So it also works in browsers as well. So for example, if you go to like a browser view, and like for example, you click on inbox and you pop it up, it's also going to be here. So if you have multiple monitors, you'll be able to do that. So it's just like a limit terminal kind of thing. Yeah. And I'll take some questions from the audience as well. I think I have only 2 more minutes. So if you have any other questions, please.
Rob, you got your answered question. So yeah. So Orion, I'm just going to pick you next because you haven't asked a question yet, and then Steve, I'll have you wrap things up. Okay.
All right, cool.
My question was just what thoughts do you have about kind of interoperability and how both your tool, but also tools like this that kind of act as a sort of hub, right, where they're bringing lots of disparate systems together. How do you imagine, or like, just what are your thoughts are on how these kinds of systems can interact with other projects that people will be, working on that have a lot of crossover?
I don't like from a user perspective, I don't think like this will be like can work as well if you have like 2 basically hub-like systems and a bit onto it. Like if you do not want to, for example, have like a duplicate archive for everything you have, like if you just want to be like a personal search engine or something, it's very easy to build like extensions on Unigraph, or Unigraph can be an extension to the other system. For example, if you have like a personal search engine, Unigraph can pull into like in that data as well via like a custom plugin. Like if you have 2 of them, and like basically both are trying to archive everything you have, I say like you like only need to pick one. Like there's no need for you to use 2 like basically indexing system for everything. And if you're already using one of them and you feel comfortable, there's like no need to switch it to Unigraph. I guess if that's clear. Yeah. And I'll take one last question. If you have any more questions, please join the Discord server that I posted in the chat messages and ask the questions there.
EP is just as cheap, but if you're getting low.
Go ahead, Steve.
Okay, great. So one last question, and it picks up on the thread sync. Is it any provisions for bi-directional so that I change something in there, it pushes it back to the original source, like a calendar event? And then more generally, do you have any thoughts about content created or compiled that you can then push out through other channels from Unigraph out? So
exactly.
Bi-directional and publishing.
Yes. The publishing thing, I'm actually thinking about, for example, having like an Obsidian plugin, so you can sync everything to Obsidian, and you can do block references in for Unigraph in Obsidian, more like as a new search syntax. But like after that, you'll be able to just like use Obsidian publish to publish everything, because everything can be embedded into like a static HTML, so everyone else can view it. Just like you can view it in Unigraph. So that's like more of like a mediated approach, because Unigraph, it's very hard to sync like publish a graph to other people. And in Obsidian, it's more like an explicit process when you explicitly say which part I want to publish. And I think that's good. And for the other like bi-directional sync questions, we can catch up in the Discord, because I know like you talked a lot of things in the Discord as well. So let's catch up over there.
That's good.
All right. So thank you guys for all of the comments and questions and everything. Really love this opportunity. And I'm just gonna stop right now. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sophia.
Thanks, Sophia.
That was awesome. All right, Tudor, you are up next.
Thank you. I'm going to share the screen. Can you see the screen? Great. Okay, so my name is Tudor Girba. I am the CEO of Think. At Think, we are a company that is focused on making the inside of software systems explainable. But today I want to explore with you a question. We hear talking about tools for thought. The question I want to explore with you is what thought? What kind of thought? So very often when we talk about tools for thought, when people talk about tools for thought, it's a
Zoom appears to be randomly muting you, Tudor. I'm not sure why.
I can see that. This is a fascinating interface.
It's one of the most generous statements about Zoom's interface that's ever been made.
Yes. So a note is a representation of thought, right? We play a lot with those. But a tweet is also a representation of thought, right? You can say a tweet is a representation of thought. Well, maybe it's not is, maybe it's a can be. So maybe I can tweet that. So we think of these as units of focus when we think about thoughts, but there are other kinds of ways in which we would represent thoughts. For example, a diagram is a representation of thought. So if I have here a little item underneath here, for example, a wordly map is such a representation. So if I click on this link, I go to another page, and in this page, first there's some sort of documentation, and then there is a wordly map. A wordly map is a diagrammatic way to reason about a landscape. And this is something that is totally editable, but it's also part of the same, of a narrative. So when we think of a way to represent thought, right, we must go and think about languages. And so here we have a way of representing a language, right? So here's a link. We can think, okay, yeah, that's a markdown over there, but all of a sudden here we have another snippet which has an obviously totally different type of language, and that one is also should be possibly represented because there is no single way in which we want to represent thought. So, for example, here I have a link to another page which is called software assessment, and there, of course, I have references, right? So links denote those as well. But what's interesting about this one is that this representation over here crosscuts the language in which the knowledge has been captured one way or another. So if we go back to our narrative over here, we know that also not only we have, notes, maybe we have diagrams of sorts, but also code. It can be a representation of thought. So if I look, for example, here, I can have a piece of code here, and maybe I can read it and I say, okay, this is some sort of, it gets something from this URL over here and does something with PNG, probably represents it as a PNG, I guess. So this is also a representation of thought, but so I could go and read maybe deeper into this piece of code to see what exactly happens there. So maybe I want to dive deeper and now right now into the code that I'm actually playing with. But also executing code is a way of representing thought. So if I execute this one, I'll be getting some sort of an object. That's the result, right? And that result is also an interesting piece, right? And I can take a look at it in this way. So Glamorous Toolkit is the environment that we are building, and that's exactly also what I'm showing you right here. So, but we can go further because the interesting thing here, not talking here about objects. Well, here on the left-hand side, I also have an object, like this whole page that I'm seeing here is also an object. So, what about the structure of the node itself? I mean, is this not an interesting thing as well? And notice here how I can have these interfaces that I'm typically used to. I have an editor, maybe an editor that can handle different languages, but also maybe I can go behind the scenes. And now I'm looking at the object that represents this page. And then from here, this is something that maybe I can see, but this is, for example, the structure here. These are all the snippets that are available in this page. And then, of course, if I look at it like this, I can also take a look at dependencies, right? And then this is another page, right? So this is the page that I'm looking at right now. This is now another page. And of course, I can go and click on that, and I go to that page if I actually want to. But But let's go back here, because now we were talking, right, when I was looking here, this is like a dependency graph. So very often when tools for thoughts come into play, the idea of the graph and connectivity is rather prominent, rather immediately. Very often that one is actually presented as a feature. The question is, well, what else can we do here? So connections are important too. So what else can we do here? Well, if I can inspect the page, I can also actually go and inspect the database of that page. So here, for example, I talk about this snippet, this exact snippet. This is a variable that will return an object behind this very snippet. And I'm just going to say, well, could you please give me the database, and then just give me the pages from that database. So you're going to give me exactly that. It's going to be a collection that I can see over here as, you know, a collection of pages. And so of course, if I can go in any of that and I can see what's in that page. So these are all the pages in this database. But then of course, if I can get the access to those objects, I can also go and play a little bit with them and transform the way I look at these objects. So instead of looking at them as a list, I'm not going to look at them through a visualization. And then of course, here now, this is a visualization. So I can maybe go in one of those and I can see, okay, these are pages and their connections. So if I click on some of these, I can see what are the interesting nodes. And I'm just playing with this. Now, the only thing here is, right, maybe this is not a new feature, but the thing is that this is not a feature. This is a choice. This is my choice of how I want to right now look at the at some representation of thought in a way is comfortable for me at this moment in time. And so that's this is what actually gets us to this idea that in fact code and nodes are actually not that different. Because in fact here I'm not giving this presentation inside a note-taking tool. I'm giving this presentation inside a development environment. So for example, code connections. So if these node connections are interesting, code connections are equally interesting. And they are interesting so that it means that I can go in and, you know, visualize them like this. And so here, actually, this is a diagram that is produced live, which is about the dependencies of the tool that I'm using to look at this diagram. So, which means that right now, if I'm going to browse this, I'm actually browsing code. So now I'm going into a code editing mode, or what people would think of code editing, but there's no difference between the node and the code because all those differences, in fact, any boundaries in tools are arbitrary. And so here, for example, we have the specification of of what code should be loaded when we load Glamorous Toolkit, and then we can go and browse that one. And this is actually a live editor over here. And interesting enough, it has completion inside strings, because even there is no single perspective. There is no single way to look at anything. Any representation of knowledge is never enough. There's no unique way of looking at anything. And code is just a way to represent knowledge. And it turns out that when we look at things like that, we can do all sorts of combinations that are totally not possible without having these little primitives there. So for example, a book about the tool itself is interesting too. And that's exactly what we see over here. So the actual tool that we see here is called Lepiter, and this is part of Glamorous Toolkit. Glamorous Toolkit is an environment and a multiple development environment. And now when I click here, I go to a page, and this page is actually happens to be in a separate database. And when I zoom there, when I look into that one, it gives me a little context. So now I'm inside a book here. And this book can have all sorts of different ways or all sorts of interesting, this is the actual documentation about that we are shipping together with the environment. And it is made out of exactly the same kinds of things that you saw before, including, for example, this is a slideshow. You can also go in there and talk about this idea of moldable development, which is the essence of our work. We start from this idea that, in fact, it turns out that when we develop, the most energy doesn't go into how do we capture our thoughts, but it goes into how do we reason about our thoughts, about the representations of our thoughts. And that's the essence of programming. And we've created an environment where this idea of moldable, of supporting the reasoning about the representation of thought is a first-class activity. It's not something that is supported on the side, but it's the first thing that we focus on, and the editing comes typically later. So, it really goes like this. We always start with a hypothesis, and we apply an analysis, and then we interpret the results. And if we're confident, we make a decision, and that's the essence of the scientific method. The key differentiator here is that when we have an unexpected, a very large or unpredictable space, you don't have the right analysis. There's no one-click analysis that is available for the kinds of things that you actually want to find out. There's always going to be a tension if you're going to look for the one clicks, especially, for example, when we are programming. And so the essence here is that what happens when we don't have an analysis, and the essence is that we should go and mold it. And that's what we think the first ability of any environment should be. Thank you.
Awesome. I think we're really getting to the heart of things of saying maybe end user programmable applications are in fact just programming. So you said that this is Lepiter. Can you explain Glamorous Toolkit and Lepiter and how those interact?
Right. So Lepiter is a we'd say it's a knowledge management system, but it's also a notebook system. It's also a multi-language editor at the same time, because we don't think that those are distinct things. We think that they are part of the same thing. And here you're seeing an experience that is what you're seeing here on the left. This is literally the interface that we use to program the environment itself, or to reason about all sorts of other external systems or databases or external formats of various kinds. So that's what Glamorous Toolkit is. And Lepiter is this core idea of a knowledge format, which is local first. It can be replicated if you want to. You can publish it in different formats. You can take it back and then import it back into your graph. You can have multiple graphs available at the same time. You can link across those kinds of graphs if you want to. But again, the key here is that we are not building a note-taking tool. We are building a new way of programming. And we think that by rethinking the way we program, we're going to end up in the different kinds of interfaces at the end. And so you were mentioning, for example, end user programming. And we think that, end user programming is important, but the question is not how do you write systems?
For sure. I was saying that in a particular way because I think when we say phrases like end user programming, what we do is we take this term end user and we make that person somehow separate from someone who has a role as a software developer. And the reality is even people who are non-technical use Google Sheets and use all sorts of other things like that and do little bits and pieces of programming. They simply haven't gone through the brain damage of text files and compilers yet. So I didn't want to, I think that the the point that you're trying to make is saying, hey, you dummy ass programmers, why are we still using freaking terminals and plain text? Your whole system as you reason about programming should be more moldable, right?
Yeah, and so the way you capture nodes, you shouldn't make a distinction between capturing nodes and writing a program on the one hand, but on the other hand, the way you reason about either of them is actually the same, or should be the same, or at least that's what we think.
Yeah, one would hope that programming involves thoughts.
Yes, and ideally before something gets written down.
Before the
There's
programming
also-
happens, yeah.
There's also a question of, you know, the context that one comes from when one talks about user programming. I mean, Tudor and GT come from the context of Smalltalk, which was prototype Dynabook software. And if you know anything about the history of our industry, that was at a time when nobody ever thought that there would be a ruling elite class of programmers as separate from everybody else. The whole computer was always designed to be programmable from everyone, by any user. And Smalltalk was originally designed as a possible exploration of a question: what would it look like if children could program? Like that definition of everybody, that inclusive. And what you're looking at, which, you know, he touched on a little bit, is you're looking at this system behind the scenes is a return to that time when there was no such thing as an application that stovepiped your data. There was no such thing as something in the computer that was too deep for you to put your hands on. So, you know, what he could show you if you had more time is that you could go into this thing, and if you didn't like the way the tabs worked, or you want the tabs to be upside down, or you wanted it to be, you know, floating or whatever, you could just dig into, I mean, this is down to the metal. Every single thing about GT is changeable, and changeable not in a theoretical way, like you have to go download the compiler and plug it into this and that and other thing, but you could just, like, in the same language and context that you're using when you use it, you can dig into the internals, which is,
yeah,
I think sets it apart.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So when Sophia was presenting, I mentioned DabbleDB. I'm actually going to drop the YouTube link. I need to find my canonical link that I always share. But it was written by Avi Bryant in the Smalltalk Seaside web framework. And that's basically the last time I've seen this sort of system. You know, I saw Airtable appear on the scene, and I'm like, oh, that's cute. We kind of, oh wait, this is not at all like the batteries included underneath that we'd like to get back to. And Sean, that was an amazing background. I do have actually a redirect. So what is this all written in? It's desktop only. Tell us a little bit more about that, Tudor.
Right. So this is written in the underneath language is called Faro, which is a Smalltalk system, and Glamorous Toolkit basically is another Smalltalk system that kind of reinvents also the user interface, but also comes with new kinds of models. For example, rethinking the interface through which you're programming things. But the essence here is our goal is to actually go and change programming. So, for example, we're saying, well, this is written in Faro, and right now here I have a little snippet that allows me to, you know, get some sort of, I think it's going to be a JavaScript. So if I look at this one, it's going to give me a JavaScript string, and I'm going to, you know, parse it. And all of a sudden I have a browser for the abstract syntax tree of JavaScript. So and then I can use this one to go and write static analysis against this one, which is one of the interesting use cases. We can do the same thing with other kinds of data structures. Right now it is available as a desktop on all major platforms, as it is dedicated right now to developers. But so one thing maybe here is that note how many levels deep can you go in such a short or condensed space? Like how many meta levels deep can you go? And that's what we are saying. That's my question here. Because, you know, we can talk about the tool as much as we want, and yeah, we do want to give people a tool because that's what starts the conversation. But at the end of the day, we want to talk about the kinds of thoughts that the tools that we expose ourselves to are going to, you know, limit us to. And this is not the ultimate environment, but I do think that this is very useful if we are to have a conversation to introduce this little question in there. And Glamorous Toolkit is there so that people can go and explore a universe which is slightly broader.
I think a useful question in this context, again, is the interchange question. So is the data for this files on disk? How does one move things from here to someone else, etc.?
Right. That's an interesting question, right? So you'd say, well, I'm seeing something here. How does this one connect to the implementation? And this is one of those things where you'd want to read. It's a reasoning question, right? So let's go and actually go and find out. I'm now looking inside I'm looking inside this page. So I'm looking at the object inside the page. And then this object has different views because we think that every single object is a representation of some thought, right? It's the result of some execution, and hence it's susceptible to the same principle that it can be viewed in many different ways. So serialization is an interesting presentation of this object, and all of a sudden it tells you, well, this is where it is, right? But if you want to find out where exactly it is, then we're gonna click on this one, and it's gonna tell us, well, this is the file locator that's exactly on this at this place in time. So I just you came up with the question, and I'm just answering that question without leaving and doing any other thing. It's right there. And the reason it's there is because the way we have developed the system was actually by answering these questions. We create these views. Every time we have a question, we're going to create a view that makes the question comfortable, not the answer, that makes the question comfortable.
So that is excellent, but I'm going to ask the question again. So there's a file on disk, and you can show me the path to it. You can expect it from within the tool. How do I share it with someone else?
It's just a file on your disk. So, for example, you can push it.
So you haven't thought about how to integrate sharing with other people, is what you're saying?
Oh, of course. I'm just saying that you don't. Of course, this is a layer that you would put now on top of it. So the simplest thing is just put it on Git and share it with somebody else.
Okay.
For example, we use it as for documenting systems, but equally on top of it, you can have we have a sharing service which is not yet public, where you would basically share with other people the kinds of your changes.
So files on disk are the ultimate backend for this, or is there something else?
The one that is visible right now is our files on disk. Yes.
Okay.
And those files, that file format, that .lepiter file format, I guess one of the things that I've seen from Smalltalk systems is like it kind of has like the VM problem of like if I'm like living inside of a VM doing some stuff, and then I'm like I want to give it to Bill. I'm like, hey Bill, here's my 5 GB VM, and that's just not a real. If I want to share like one small change I made inside the VM. That can be really challenging. That's my surface level experience with Smalltalk-like systems. How does Lepiter or Glamorous Toolkit, does it fall into that same challenge, or can you take individual pieces out and kind of open them and play with them?
So yeah, the answer is the latter. But here, for example, this is a single file representing this particular page. You can just copy it and manipulate it in any way. And there's a JSON format here. Of course, you don't have the schema for it, but it's actually not that difficult in this specific case. So, and that's basically how we would address that problem. But also, like nowadays, even a Smalltalk system would externalize sources in some sort of file system, because we have to live with those quaint abstractions. And then people can use, for example, something like Git, which is what we are using right now in order to publish our code.
Got it. Cool. That's helpful.
Yeah, very cool. So you're sort of you've wrapped Lepiter around this stuff to make it more sort of an addition or aimed at people more broadly looking at the tools for thought space. And so right now you're looking at the more developer-focused workflows that are naturally going to be GitHub-centric is the space that you've come from. Is that the right way to think about it?
Yeah, it's just that we thought originally that we're going to add Lepiter on top, and then it turns out that it became the core. Because there's no, you see, Glamorous Toolkit is our exploration of what the development experience can be. And then we took a look at the noise around tools for thought, and we wanted to see if there's anything we can learn from that. And it turned out that we could replicate one of those systems rather easily on top of Glamorous Toolkit. But after a little bit more work, we found out that we could actually take out a significant part of Glamorous Toolkit and replace it with something that is broader. And that was the most exciting experience over the last year. And it was a little bit surprising. It's surprising that we didn't think of it, but like it took about a month to get our hands dirty to figure out, oh, there's a broader opportunity here. So just to how far does this one can this one go? If we go to, for example, this is a class, right? And it has methods. It's like, I can browse those methods. There's code in there, but there's a comment here too. And this comment is actually a live document, which is exactly the same that I would write in my knowledge base. And originally we thought of this use case and a page in what appears to be like a knowledge base to be two different kinds of things, two different worlds. But then it turns out that they are not. Of course, it's quite obvious in hindsight. But anyway, so the opportunities that I see here as being different, or the opportunities for learning, is that if we spend doesn't matter how much energy you spend, if you stay shallow, you're only going to get the kinds of value. You're only going to extract the kinds of value that is available at that level. But if there's an indication that you can go way deeper, then the same amount of energy can get you way more value. And that's what we think would be worth looking at.
Orion, go ahead, ask your question.
All right, that was a great talk. Really enjoyed that. One of the things I really liked is the way you were talking about like the representation of thought, right? Because the thing that I really like about representations is that like they are the actual things that exist in the world, right? We can have plenty of epistemological debates about like what are thoughts and what is meaning and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, especially with digital systems, the thing that's actually there is some representation of it, and that can give us different kinds of like affordances for what we can do with thoughts, right? Or with representations of something anyway. So I've got kind of a couple of related questions to that. One is I'm just curious to hear if you have thoughts about like how do you think about representations in general, right? Like, do you kind of have a like a framework for thinking about that stuff? That's like a really interesting research area for me personally. So like I'd love to hear your thoughts. And then the other one, like it's kind of two. Sorry about this. Like, have you ever thought about? Because I noticed in a lot of these things that we're looking at here, you might have like a note, right, which has some structured text in there. You've got some headers and some paragraphs and stuff. Have you explored using different representations of the text itself, right? Because a lot of what you're doing seems to be about kind of being able to expose these kinds of like mappings between what you're visually seeing and the underlying structure of the data or the knowledge or the representations. So have you seen, like, have you explored being able to do more like real structural stuff with text? Because obviously under the hood it's just a very kind of linear structure, and so we see paragraphs there and we can recognize there might be three kind of separable parts of a note or something, but the computer doesn't really have that as like a first class like affordance of your representations. That was a very long couple questions put together, but yeah.
Okay, so let's start from, I think that's exciting. So let's start from the first question, which is thoughts on the representation of thoughts. So one of the interesting things that we found in this work is if you look at a typical development experience and you take two screenshots of what is on the screen of a developer, and then you go to another developer that is working on another system and you take another screenshot of that one and you put those two screenshots side by side, you can't say which is which because they look the same. And that's an interesting thing because it turns out that there's this thin layer, like you can't actually, it's interesting that we say that, you know, like in the physical world only representations matter, which is indeed an interesting debate to have. But in the digital world, every representation is also the content of it. So, which means that they are both subject and views at the same time, and then it's up to us to think of it. Which is also why you know, programming is the most it should be the greatest environment for doing philosophy. Because it's pretty much executable philosophy. So now if you think about that one, right, and then we can go back to this idea that when you look at two different systems, two different developers, two different screens, and you see the same thing, there's a missed opportunity there because you can never experience anything directly. There's always an in-between, and there's always a tool in between. And that tool, the shape of that tool is so essential. So if you look at these 6 things that you see here on the screen, these are 6 different objects, right? And then typically when we think about objects and then inspect, we're gonna inspect those and we're gonna see variables and values because that's what we see, right? All objects in the world are pretty much viewed or inspected exactly in the same way. So we're gonna see these 2 columns over and over again. And they look kind of similar, right? I can see this one has more variables than the rest of them, but other than that, it's hard for me to distinguish, right? But if I change those, if I project a different thing, I don't change the object, I only change the view, all of a sudden I'm going to interact with these differently. I'm going to engage with them totally differently. This is a fraction, this is a folder, this is some sort of picture, this is, you know, this is some sort of a diagram, this is a data structure over here, some sort. So this is not a optional thing. This is a core idea that should be pervasive in any development activity. And in fact, in any interaction with anything inside the computer. And the reason we started from a single object, because that's the smallest unit that we have in our system to describe other systems. So if we looked at the outcome, and right now we have the largest amount of effort is being spent on people trying to figure out, but they don't know how. And if you look at the outcome, the fact that we have all these amounts of code that people cannot reason about anymore, right? Then we see that there's there must be something systemically wrong because of the scale of the problem that we're having. So in order to change anything like that, you have to go and affect significantly the smallest interaction. And that's why we focus for the longest time on just a single object. And so that's where this whole idea of multiple development comes from. And then on top of it, we just added more and more and more, but the same principles were applied at every single levels of abstraction. And that's why we are able to now reason about pretty much our entire system anytime we want, because there are thousands of stories already built into the system. Because it was constructed like that. And we also are actually using this same system to actually go and reason about all the other systems. And we can outperform typically teams that work on those systems. It's not seldom that it's an order of magnitude, the difference in how quickly and how accurately you can say something about something like that. So their representation of thought. And now you said, well, have we worked with playing with different presentations, for example, for textual things? And yes, of course we did. So here's just a brief demo. So this is actually a small example here. It turns out that this is an executable thing. So I can see here this example using some other example, which is I can then spawn some other one. So here, right, I have some pieces of code, right? I'm not showing those pieces of code linearly. I'm showing them now in some sort of a graph, right? But watch what happens here, right? In order to do something like this, we actually had to construct a whole new graphical stack so that we can have this dot, which is actually part of this, is introduced by the syntax highlighting as I type, and then have this dot be connected with this edge, which is connected with something that is somewhere else. And then have the whole thing, right? So right now you're seeing a whole scene embedded into a node inside my environment, right? But we can go a step further. So if I expand all of these a little bit, and I'm gonna say, let's click on this one, let's click on this one. So these are now examples. Examples also happen to be executable, and I can get some object there, which means that I can turn those around and I can see what is the result that I have in there, right? And now I can see, okay, yeah, this is like that. And then I can see maybe how the result is being composed. And so this is a different way in which I can go and manipulate and understand things, right? So this is one of those kinds of examples of how just playing with, we didn't do anything, right? The same concepts existed before, but we just assembled them in a slightly different way. And now we are able to provide all sorts of new narratives. There's a whole new space that is possible just by accepting that there's no single representation of anything that should be the dominant one.
Yeah, awesome. One super quick follow-up, because what I was actually specifically referring to is not the way that you can compose pieces of text together, because that's like my favorite thing about the system you built. Like, it's incredibly impressive, but it's kind of like, so say with what we're looking at here on the left, you've got your source code, right? Like, have you explored those, like the smallest, kind of unit, like the smallest block that you have of text in the system, right? Which in this case, I'm guessing is effectively like plain text, which you're parsing and you're doing a bunch of other stuff, right? So have you explored like that text itself, like the plain text,
of course,
taking on like a more structural? Okay.
So here, for example, I gave you this example, like in which I just downloaded some JavaScript from GitHub, and then I parse it over here. So here now I see an editor in which I can see the actual, JavaScript on the left-hand side. And then I can see here the actual syntax tree of that text. So now here we have objects about that. So this is a way of not going inside here, right? This is a text thing. This is now a tree, right? Because that's what an abstract syntax tree is. And of course I can click on that and I can go and navigate into it and so on. So I can manipulate it. And there's in fact, one of the interesting applications of Glamorous Toolkit is reasoning and diving through structures that just look like text, but they are not text, and recovering those structures, and then on top of it, creating new layers of understandings and so on.
We should probably call time, since we're an hour and a half and we've slammed right into the end. My mind is full, as it often is from these sessions. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you to Sophia, who may have dropped off already, and for Tudor for presenting. I'm going to hit, so everyone wave, and then I will stop the recording.